Hi everyone, welcome to Beyond the Evidence. This is the channel where justice matters. My name is Marv. I am a true crime fanatic, and I love to dig deeper into the mysteries of unsolved cases. Join me as we search for missing persons, uncover the clues in unsolved murders, follow along with jury trials, and we'll be a voice for the voiceless. I'll share with you the facts, the theories, the clues, the evidence, and the controversies that surround these cases. This is Beyond the Evidence. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Beyond the Evidence, formerly known as True Crime with Marv. I'm going to bring Andrea on. Hello, Andrea.
Hello.
How are you?
Cold.
Yeah, it's very cold, very cold. I hope everybody is surviving these Arctic blizzards and tornadoes that are going on and all kinds of weather mishaps across the United States right now. For those of you who may just first be joining us for the Tabitha Shuck Raines series, I just wanted to give a little breakdown of what this case is about. And it's so on October 2nd, 2002, 16-year-old Tabitha, also known as Tabi, went missing after leaving her home in Tipton, Indiana. At the time, Tabi was married. She left behind her husband, Michael, and her 6-month-old son, Drake, along with her parents, Buffy and Mark. It was believed that Tabi was last seen on Wednesday, October 2nd, when she asked her mother-in-law to watch her son while she went with a friend so she could go to the hospital to visit the friend's gravely ill grandmother. She was supposedly picked up by her friend's boyfriend, Kyle Neff. Tabitha never returned home after leaving that night. Her husband filed a missing persons report at 6:10 p.m., just short of 24 hours from the last time Tabi was seen. On October 5th, 2002, she was found laying face up in the Cicero Creek with a single gunshot wound between her eyes. The teenager's body was discovered behind the ball fields in the city park. For the past 20 years, the family of Tabi has been searching for justice. They want all parties involved in her unaliving charged and convicted. So we have received documentation regarding the case, and that is what we're going through. This is part 20, I believe. So on the Beyond the Evidence main YouTube page, there are playlists, and there's specifically one for Tabitha. Feel free to go and rewatch those videos. Take notes. Leave us your thoughts under the comments on the video or in the chat here. And because we'd like to see what your thoughts are too on this. So today, Andrea, we are going to read at least 4 of the officers' statements and depositions, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So can you explain to the audience who Gordon Taco was at the time that Tabi went missing?
He was the Tipton City Police Chief at the time.
Okay. So Gordon Taco was the city police chief at the time.
Correct.
Got it. So we have, I'm thinking this is a statement from him.
Yeah.
And it's 15 pages long. And the people that are involved in this statement are, of course, Gordon Taco, the chief of police. And it looks like Alden.
Yeah. Elizabeth's attorney.
Elizabeth Balser's attorney. Okay. So we're going to start with this one. And then we'll talk about it afterwards and then move into the next one. So I'll start here. Andrea, are you going to be Alden and I'm going to be Taco?
I guess so.
All righty. We're getting the deposition of Gordon Taco. Jay, please swear in the witness. Chief, please raise your right hand. Do you promise to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? And he says, I do.
Okay, Mr. Alden. State your name, please.
Gordon Taco.
And what is your occupation?
I am the police chief of the city of Tipton.
On October the 3rd, did you receive some information that Tabitha was missing, or at what point in time did you first become aware of it?
I'm going to refer to my summaries as we go along here, but on October 4th, Detective Stout told me that he was working a missing person case as Tabitha Raines being the victim. Our department had received a report from Michael, the victim's husband. That victim did not return home the night before. Actually, this was of Friday that Detective Stout told me. And it was Wednesday that the victim did not return.
Friday is the first time you knew of it?
That I recall, Friday is the first day that I have note of it.
Friday, October the 4th, and Detective Stout started on Thursday?
I think that's when he may have been told about it. I'm not 100% positive, but I believe that is true.
When there is a missing persons report like that, is that kind of routine? Tell me how this is handled in your department.
When we get the actual contact about a person missing, obviously marriage factors, age, friends, and the last person who had contact with them, trace back their steps, start contacting people and try to see where they are at. There are times when people leave and they just don't want the other party to know where they are going, that kind of thing. We track them down through friends, employers, case-by-case basis. Then we would put them in the missing person NCIC system.
And was that done?
Yes, it was.
When was that done?
Friday afternoon. Actually, I contacted Officer Steiner. We have a system and it's fairly new to us. It is called a locator. We got it through a grant, National Missing and Exploited Children, and we run it through and we can make posters up like missing person posters. So I had Officer Steiner come in and make posters up and get it posted throughout the community and also run it through it NCIC as a missing person.
And what is the next thing that you did?
After that, Detective Steiner ran the investigation and he just kept me informed. I did ask my assistant chief, John Alley, to contact Judge Nash and Jay Rich to see if she would be considered an adult because she was 16 but married. The answer I got was as an adult. With that locator system that I was talking about, we did put her in as a juvenile, but being married.
Who was the first people that you know of that tried contacting her? How extensive was this search here?
You would have to talk to Detective Stout. I'm not sure. He kept me informed on that Friday afternoon. He may have done more work on it that I'm not aware of.
What's the active participation you had of what you know, what you did? And let's go through as far as this investigation is concerned.
On Saturday, about 1:55 p.m., I have noted in my report I was paged to call the department right away. Upon calling the department, I was told that they had found a body in Cicero Creek in the city park. Tony Frelly of the state police and I was at the same place, and I informed Frowley of the situation, and him and I proceeded to the park.
And what happened when you got there?
We were met by Detective Stout and part-time officer Chet Netherton. As we were arriving, they were setting up crime scene tape and securing off the area. You could see the body in the creek. At one point, Officer Netherton did go into the creek, actually go into the creek to make sure that it was a body. And I contacted the coroner to come out and Officer Steiner. Officer Frowley contacted some of his people at the state police, and after that, we just secured the scene until the proper people could arrive to start looking the scene over.
How many people do you think went down to that creek before it got secured?
I have no idea. Officer Netherton was there first, then Officer Stout was contacted and got there, and they were securing it prior to my arrival. Just a few minutes.
Inaudible.
I can't answer.
Okay. Did you personally talk to the young boy who originally saw the body?
Later, originally Detective Stout did, I believe.
And what did he tell you?
I didn't talk to him. I'm not really sure.
Well, that night, or if you ever talked to him, what did he tell you?
That him and his buddy were fishing. If I remember it, let's see if I noted it. I remember him saying that him and his buddy were there the night before and saw that out there. And they told a grandmother of what I recall. I could be a little bit off on this. They were out there on Friday evening and they saw what looked like a body to him. And he made it a note of it to, I believe it was a grandmother. And
how old is this boy?
He's in middle school.
So 12, 13, 14?
Right.
And you had talked to him personally?
Tabi was located on Saturday, and Kaysen went to school on Tuesday, and I went to the school that morning and talked to him, and Gary talked to him in the meantime.
And he appears to be a pretty sharp man to you?
Right.
And he had seen what he thought was a body before, right?
Right.
And he had been fishing in the creek, right?
Right.
And he had went fishing again?
Later, Saturday morning.
Do you know if he went fishing on Thursday?
I don't know.
Did anyone ever ask him if he did?
I don't think they did, but then again, I can't speak for Detective Stout.
How obvious is it to look down to see this body? Would you have to go down in the bank almost to the creek, or?
We could see it from the top of the bank, which is what I did. And with him not knowing anybody's missing, there's no obstruction, no trees, no weeds. Her body's half on the bank and half submerged in water. It was in plain view.
Before we go back to the next thing that you did, how or what was your instructions? I know that Detective Stout was the chief investigator on this. I understand that. But are you aware of everything he did? Does he tell you basically everything he does or what everybody says, or?
He's in charge of the investigation. It's his to go with. He keeps me posted. Yeah, he may give me an overview of where he is at, who he's talked to. If it is something that he doesn't feel is important, then he may not tell me. But if it is something that he feels is important, then he might or he would. Him and Tony both kept me pretty well, pretty well. Mainly Gary kept me pretty much advised on who he had talked to and what his thoughts were.
Okay, so you went to the scene and it was being secured, and what did you do after that?
Basically, I just coordinated if they said they needed something or someone contacted. I just did coordination for them. Like I said, I called the coroner. We basically called like transport.
So after you called the coroner, did you participate in any of the interviews?
No, if I recall correctly, according to some of my notes, especially the first couple of days, I just coordinated efforts with people for the investigators to talk to, dealt with the media, request that type of thing, and that was my biggest role. If they needed something or wanted me to contact somebody for them, that was my biggest role, was coordination. I just did that.
Why was Michael Raines excluded as a suspect?
I'm not sure that they ever excluded him as a suspect.
Is he still?
You would have to ask Detective Stout and Frowley to be sure on that.
Okay, he took a polygraph, right?
Yes, I'm aware that he did.
And are you aware of how he did on that?
My understanding is that he failed it.
Do you know what the status is on the lab reports on the stuff that they found in his house recently?
No, I don't know. Officer Steiner has that.
He went over and got that.
Uh-huh.
So is there anything else that you did as the investigation proceeded?
Like I said, just coordination. I asked an officer to contact the family and let them know that a body had been found in the creek and to come to the courtroom in the public safety building so we could make an identification and we would know where we were at. And I had a chaplain, so a chaplain was going to be with them. After I left the park, I went to the Young and Nicholas Funeral Home, which is where the coroner works out of. Officer Steiner and I believe Detective Rowley and I went there about a little after 6:30 or so and just looked at the body and notified the family.
Have you talked to the pathologist?
No.
Have to talk to Stout about whether he talked to the pathologist?
I don't know if Gary Stout talked to him personally or not. I'm sure the information was relinked to him from Officer Steiner. I believe went to the autopsy and Officer Ninestream of the state police, who was crime scene tech, who was present also. I'm sure Gary didn't attend.
Do you know whether or not Andrew Bush or not was polygraphed?
Yes, I believe he was.
Do you know the results of his polygraph?
I believe I was told he failed it.
Who was the other suspects in this case other than the ones that you ultimately decided to charge?
Well, I think they really think they looked at anybody as a suspect.
Well, I mean, key people. Who were the key people that Stout and you were talking about?
I don't know that we really settled on anybody. I know Kyle Neff was a suspect, Elizabeth was a suspect, and Yates became one, and then was charged. I know they were talking to a kid named Derek Branham, and I don't think they ended up, I think they wanted to talk to him some more, and he wouldn't talk to them at that point.
Why was he considered to be a suspect?
My understanding was that I could be wrong, but my understanding from Gary or Tony or both was that they thought that he may have some knowledge about the gun that was used.
And was he excluded?
I don't think so. I don't believe so. But they would have to answer that.
Who else?
I believe a person named Nick Hall was talked to, who was a cousin of Tabi's. I don't know the facts, though. I don't know the charge.
Do you know the name of the person that Neff bought this cocaine from?
Adam Johnson. I believe it was Adam Johnson.
And was there anybody else?
I'm scanning my report. He talked to a person named Wes Miller, and I don't recall if he talked to Wes as a suspect or as someone who potentially had some knowledge. I'm wanting to say at first as a suspect. That was the initial conversation, but I can't be 100% sure.
Anyone else?
That's what I was scanning through. Just off the top of my head, I would say no. There is just some of it I don't remember.
Who had information about the head injuries that Tabi may have occurred immediately following the time that she was found?
Who from the last person who saw her or the last look perspective?
Both.
Well, Detective Steiner and Detective Frawley had seen some of the injuries after she was released from the creek.
Now, at that time, was there any conversation not to release that information to the public, or was that common knowledge about what had occurred?
No, initially I believe we decided not to release the location of the gunshot. We released initially it was a gunshot wound, but not the location of the gunshot.
Was there any discussion about it in the park when all the people were there, just conversation by the police officers that could have been overheard by people in the park?
Well, I guess that could have been possible, but until we actually, I believe the coroner went in and he thought she had a gunshot wound. He went in to the water before she was actually removed, I believe. I'm saying no to your question because we tried to keep it a secret as possible, and we had that area blocked off. Someone could have heard something, but I wouldn't have thought so.
How many people were around when you arrived?
When I arrived, very few. There were people searching, then word travels, and people started coming and outside the taped area.
Would you say 50 to 100?
I wouldn't say 100, maybe 20. I don't think there was as many as 50. I would say 25 at the most. We had a lot of people coming and going too.
How many hours was it that the body remained in the creek before it was taken out of the creek after it was found? Do you know?
Well, I was notified about 1:55 and I left at 6:20. I would say the body was removed in the area of between 5:30 and 6 because photographs being taken and things like that.
And what was the distance between the area that was secured and the general public? How far away from the body did you tape the crime scene off?
I'm trying to think. Well, we taped it off along the creek bank.
Would Steiner know that better?
Yeah, Steiner would.
Okay, any other suspect that you know besides Hall, Johnson, Branham, and...
Not off the top of my head.
Anything else that you personally did that involves this investigation?
Family notification, coordination, media. I have noted on Monday, October the 7th, I took a call about 5:23 for Detective Stout from a Tiffany boat rate. Just spoke to her briefly, and she was going to get back in touch with him on Tuesday morning.
And what did she want?
It said that she heard a comment on the school bus about the case, and she just wanted to let us know, and she was going to call Detective Stout on Tuesday morning to discuss it further. And then I'd also checked with the school corporation to see if we were able to personalize it. She had made a comment, but we were able to determine that.
What comment?
I don't have it noted.
Do you know who Chris Harper is?
Not off the top of my head.
Do you know anything about him?
Not off the top of my head.
Has his name ever came up to your knowledge?
It's possible. I don't recall, but I'm not saying that it didn't happen.
Let's get back to the detail regarding the funeral. You went to the funeral home, so obviously we got the funeral home people that would know about the condition of the body.
At that point, it was just the coroner, and prior to my leaving the coroner and Detective Steiner and Detective Frawley, and I believe an employee of the funeral home was also present. That would have been a while ago, so I don't know.
Okay, well, did you give anybody any specific instructions about not releasing information to the media or other individuals?
Yeah, that they wouldn't. I mean, we're in the middle of an investigation, and I was going to handle the media contacts. That's what we decided between us. And that obviously that they are not to discuss the case. I'm assuming we are all talking about the paper.
So you all had a meeting and you specifically said that so that they all understood.
Well, initially, who came was Frawley, Steiner, standard practice for them not to discuss it.
I'm trying to be real specific here, so I just need a yes or no answer to this.
Okay.
Did you all sit down in a private room and discuss specifically, and did you use the words, "You are not to discuss this case with anybody, and it is not to go out of this room except for the people involved as to anything that has to do with the investigation, or as to the injuries that Tabi received"? Did you specifically say that to those people?
I don't
Yes or no?
a specific order? No.
All right. Is there anything else that you did or authorized?
I'm scanning my report. On Tuesday, October 8th, about Monday night, Tuesday morning, about just after midnight, Justin Smith came in to see me and said he had heard a rumor that John Yates was the one that had pulled the trigger and Amanda Pratt was involved and Paul Vasquez was involved.
Did you question him?
I had the investigators talk to him. I believe I talked to him, then I referred the information to the investigators. He also commented that Liz Balser was up by the courthouse on Wednesday evening, and that Wednesday evening was the night that Tabi came up missing. Who was up painting the East Street, in which either meant they were painting a building or partying, and I passed that information to the investigators also. As I noted earlier, I came with Kaysen Wall and Mr. McKinney at the school on Tuesday.
So the young man's name was what?
Vincent McKinney. He was with Kaysen Wall, and they were the two boys that were fishing. At one point in time, Linda, I know her as Linda Fish, Elizabeth's mother. I'm trying to find that note. Or Linda Moss. I know her as two. On October the 10th at about 9 p.m., she came in and had two receipts from Key Banks where she said that Elizabeth was with Rudy, Diane's boyfriend, and had made some transactions on the 9th on that Wednesday evening. So I made a copy of the receipts and contacted Key Banks and to see if they could make pictures of the transactions, which they did.
Do you have a copy of those receipts?
Yes, I do. The receipt is dated October 2nd, 2002 at 5:38 p.m. There was a transaction where $60 was withdrawn with a $2 fee, and
What time was that?
5:38
On the 2nd?
on the 2nd. And that picture, you can see a picture that I do believe is Elizabeth on the passenger side there.
Where is this located?
On East Hoffer Street in Kokomo. And then, and 8:37 or 8:38, there was another transaction. And in that picture, you can see Rudy, and you can tell there's someone else in the vehicle, but you can't tell who it is. And Linda said she's using that as an alibi, that Elizabeth couldn't have been in town that night.
Have you talked to Rudy?
No, I think Detective Stout had. I forwarded this information on to the investigators too.
Are these the only photographs that you have? Because I didn't know you had these.
Yeah, today is the first time I have seen those. I have copies, but you can't see.
Okay, that was Jay Rich, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have copies, but
These are made by the bank.
are these the only copies that exist? Because these are pretty important. Jay Rich, we all need them.
Mm-hmm.
Alden, I would secure them very closely as we consider this to be.
You only have a 20-minute drive from Kokomo to Tipton. And yeah, she was there in the first one, but we don't know if that is her or not in the second one. Even so, it's a 20-minute drive, so.
Even so, I'm just talking about the photos. I know that you've got them and you've had them for a while, and it is very important to preserve those. I will definitely be introducing them in evidence at the trial. How about the coordination about the information came to your attention about an alibi? Were you involved with any coordination with the Kokomo police coordinating any coordinating any activating anything with the Kokomo police regarding little daddies? That is a screwed up paragraph.
Yeah, it is. I think it's supposed to be coordinating any activities.
Right.
Anything with the Kokomo. Okay. Taco says, I'm showing on October 10th, about 8:27. Jim Clabro from Kokomo Police called, stated that a female had called one of their other officers about some comments that her boyfriend had made during a confrontation they had.
Well, there was a sting operation set up with the Kokomo police. You are familiar with that, right?
I know that happened. Not all the details and stuff they were going through, Detective Frawley.
You didn't authorize that or organize it?
No. Kokomo handled that.
Detective Stout and Frawley that talked to Kokomo about all that.
I may have answered a call or something. I'm not sure if it was Detective Stout or Frawley contacted them, but I was aware that situation happened.
I just want to know if you're the person that...
No.
Okay.
I also went with Detective Frawley on October 10th and, Tim Miller, and we went to the Howard County Jail and we spoke with Mark Jimenez, who is in jail up there, and about a comment that he had allegedly made. And let's see. He had made a comment at one point, and he said he didn't know why he would have said it, other than that he was on meth. And after speaking with him, we didn't feel that he was involved. Him and his girlfriend had gotten into an argument, and...
Okay, hold on. Just a second. The tape is out. I'm going to turn the tape over at this time. Chief, you were stating what now about Mark Jaimez.
Calibro at Kokomo PD was concerned in this situation was that Jaimez and his girlfriend, and that his girlfriend that told him that Jaimez had made a comment about killing somebody, so the detective took him to Howard County Jail, where it was then dropped on us.
Anything else you did?
No response.
Were you present when the car was towed from Liz Balser's trailer parking area? Do you remember?
I don't think so.
You don't know anything about that?
I know that the vehicle was towed and that it was processed, but I wasn't present that I recall.
And do you know if it was in working condition when it was towed?
I don't know. Officer Steiner could probably answer that.
Okay, anything else you did?
I was also involved in obtaining subpoena for cell phone records of Linda Moss's, which was in Elizabeth's possession the night she got arrested for public intoxication.
Do you know anything about that arrest?
No, I knew it happened the next day. When I got to work the next day, she was arrested for a PI, public intoxication.
Was that planned? I mean, to stop the car that she was in?
No.
Was there a reason why the driver was released and she was arrested?
You will have to ask the arresting officer about that.
You didn't have anything to do with that?
We don't operate that way.
Okay, anything else you did?
Not that I really recall. Like I said earlier, just essentially coordinated, kept people in touch. If the investigators needed something done or someone contacted, helped them out in that way.
Did you authorize the release of anybody from jail if they would cooperate?
Not that I recall. That wouldn't be my decision anyway. That would be the investigators. Then go to the prosecutor with it. On concern with Elizabeth's vehicle, you asked about, Linda contacted me concerned about the vehicle because it would not start when they were done with it. And I did authorize that they tow it and have it put back in her driveway. And we did have conversation later, and that is when she brought the receipts up to me.
Any other things that you were personally involved with?
Not that I can recall, and not that I have noted in my summary.
Was it your car or Stout's car that made the arrest of Neff, Yates, and Balser?
That was done in a court room effort with the prosecutor, Detective Stout, and Detective Raleigh. They made the decision. I was present, but they made the decision.
That's all I have.
Oh my gosh.
That was a disaster.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. Hey, Frosty, how you doing?
And for being chief of police, he didn't know squat.
No, he did not. I think we really need to read, and you're better at reading this stuff than I am. There's handwritten notes all over this.
Right.
So on the first page, do you want to read the notes that are on the first page?
Hang on. And these notes are written by Alden, right? That's what we're assuming?
Oh, that's what we're assuming.
Okay, it says, got phone records to Stout to check out alibi Saturday, original ATM pictures. Then it says, I took ATM slip up on my own. No one told me to. I think it was Thursday, 10/3/02. One would think that the chief of police would know what is going on in a murder case, not just if someone tells them. So-called Detective Stout should report to the chief of police. Then it says all of his I don't recall, I don't remember, all these kids have to remember exact date, month, and time. A 16-year-old girl was beat and shot to death. And then it says on down. He's talking about about the gunshot wound, but not the gun. They said about the gun, but not the location of the gunshot wound.
Yep.
It said, well, Stout asked Michael Raines about a gun on 10/5. Tony Frawley asked, and it says something.
Rebecca Amon
about a gun on 10/7. On 10/9, Pat Comer heard rumors reported he sold a gun to Debbie Neff, a .38 caliber revolver. I guess a lot of people did know.
Yep.
And then on down it says when he was talking about him being handling the media contacts and stuff, it says it was all over town. Everyone knew. They were talking kids when they were telling kids when they questioned them.
Yep.
And then it says about the two boys that found her. October the 10th brought in bank receipts. And then talking about the date on the bank receipt said, I took ATM slip Thursday 10/3/02. And then talking about the pictures from the ATM, it says, so 30 minutes for Mike, which I'm assuming they're talking about Mike Raines, and 20 minutes for Liz. And then it says, but Jay Rich told Mike Raines if he gets off work at 1 o'clock, he'd probably be home by 1:30.
Yeah.
And then it says, Officer Steiner would probably answer that about the working condition of the car. And it says Gordon Burris and Tony Frawley. And then it says, were you involved? He was involved in obtaining the subpoena for the cell phone records. It says, why would you subpoena cell phone records on a PI, which is public intox? Each case is individual.
Mm-hmm.
Then it says the reason why the driver was released and Liz wasn't. It says, and everyone else in the van, Liz only one taken. They had all been drinking. And it says you'll have to ask the arresting officer. And it says, does the police chief not question why a drunk driver is let go and a passenger is taken to, and all who is the officer? And then it says, we don't operate that way, is what Taco said. And then in the side note, it says, whatever. And then Alden asked about the release. Did he authorize the release of anybody from jail? And he's talking about Rudy Ramos. And then it says, not that I recall, that wouldn't be my decision. It would be the investigator, who was Gary Stout, and the prosecutor, which is Jay Rich. And then it says about Liz's vehicle, it says about it not starting, and he authorized it to be towed. It says, see Kevin Steiner's report. Then it says, are other things that you were personally involved with? And he said, also, Gordon Burris told me personally today, Gordon Burris told me personally,
I think it's today.
To tow and start the car. It wouldn't start. They pushed it out of the driveway, then towed it.
Yeah. So it is kind of funny that they stopped this vehicle and there's multiple individuals in there and the only one they arrest is Liz.
The passenger, right?
Yeah.
Well, what people need to understand about this statement that we just read, or this deposition we just read, is that there's no punctuation.
Right.
All kinds of misspellings. I don't know who transcribed this, but they weren't very good at it.
No, they spelled a lot of words wrong.
And no punctuation makes it hard to read. Whether people realize that or not, it's hard to read.
Right. And we're definitely missing. So we do not have anything for this. There's some people's names in here that we do not have depositions or statements for.
A lot.
So we don't have anything on this Officer Chet Netherton, who was the first one at the park.
Unless it's in one of the supplemental case files.
Okay.
I do know that I remember reading something from Kevin Steiner, but I don't know if it was in a supplemental report or if it was one of the newspaper clippings.
I think it was in a supplemental report. Which is going to be important because after we get through all of these police officer depositions, we're going to go into the supplemental reports. So, oh my goodness.
Okay, do you want me just to read Jeff Pike's statement?
Hi, Spinster. Thank you, Kiwi. Yes, while you're doing that, because this is just a statement. It's not question.
Not a deposition or questions or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm going to run to the bathroom here real quick while you do that.
Okay. Statement of Deputy Jeffrey Pike. On October 3rd, 2002, this officer was contacted on the radio shortly before 1500 hours by Tipton Marshal Richard Bittner to meet with him at Cheryl's gas station, reference a missing juvenile. Upon arrival, this officer spoke with Marshal Bittner, who advised that he was contacted by the mother of Tabitha Shuck Raines and told that Tabitha was missing. Marshal Bittner advised that Tabitha was married to Michael Raines and lived on Northeast Street in Tipton, Indiana. We discussed that being married emancipated the girl and that she was no longer considered a juvenile under the law and that her husband would have to report her missing and that all we could do was an attempt to locate and do a welfare check. Marshal Bittner advised that he had received information that Kyle Neff had picked Tabitha up from her house on Wednesday, October the 2nd, and taken her to a hospital to stay with a friend named Amanda, whose grandmother was in the hospital and not expected to make it through the night. He had also allegedly dropped her off at the village pantry in Tipton at about 2300 hours. We went next door to the gas station to the residence of Kyle Neff and spoke with him about Tabitha. Kyle advised us that he had not picked up Tabitha, but he had seen her last night at about 7 p.m. at the village pantry. Kyle stated that he had spoken to Tabitha and that she had been waiting for someone named Liz and they were going out partying. I asked if he knew Liz's name and he said that he didn't, but that Amanda did. We, all three of us, then walked around to the front of the residence and Amanda was sitting on the front porch. When Kyle asked Amanda what Liz's last name was, Amanda said Balser. I explained the story about going to be with a friend whose grandmother was in the hospital, and Amanda stated that her grandmother had had surgery on the afternoon of the 2nd, but everything was okay and Tabitha had not been at the hospital. As Marshal Bittner and I were leaving, Kyle asked if we knew what would take a grease spot out of concrete. He indicated to a spot on the porch. We observed a rusty colored spot on the porch, which appeared to have been walked through as there were footprints leading away from the spot. We advised Kyle to try either some oil dry or some kitty litter. After leaving, this officer contacted dispatch to get the phone number for Elizabeth Balser and called her, leaving a message to call this officer. I also contacted Penny at the city police department to advise the police department of this case, as I believed that Tabitha's husband would be calling to officially report her missing. Later in the afternoon, Penny contacted this officer to come to the PD to listen to Tabitha's husband's phone call reporting her missing. I arrived at the PD at approximately 16:55 hours and did listen to the call. I then again attempted to contact Liz Balser, and she was now home. She advised that she had seen Tabitha on Wednesday evening at Tabitha's house and has visited with her until approximately 6:15 p.m., but had then left, and they did not have any plans to meet later that night or any other night. Liz stated that they had decided that they should get together more often to do things together. Liz told this officer that he should contact Lindsay Groves, as Tabitha and Lindsay had walked their babies on Wednesday afternoon, and that Tabitha had possibly said something to Lindsay about her plans for Wednesday night. This officer then contacted Lindsay Groves, and she stated that they had walked their babies together, but Tabitha had not mentioned to her anything about her plans for Wednesday night. End of statement, November the 16th, 2002, Deputy Jeffrey D. Pike.
Okay, so did I hear that right? He asked about an oil spot?
Yeah, a rust spot. A rust-colored spot on his porch that had footprints leading away from it. Nobody bothered to check that spot, though, did they?
No. And he says that in here, Pike says that he did not. Oh, where'd it go?
I don't know what part you're looking for.
Oh, he had picked her up from her house on Wednesday, October 2nd, and taken her to the hospital. So, okay, so Marshall Bittner, who's that?
That he had not picked up Tabitha, but he had seen her at 7 p.m. at the village pantry.
Right, but Marshall Bittner advised that he had received information that Kyle Neff had picked Tabitha up from her house.
Right.
And taken her to the hospital to stay with
Amanda.
Okay. He allegedly dropped her off at Village Pantry in Tipton about 2300 hours. And Kyle said he did not pick her up.
Right.
But he had seen her about 7 p.m. at the Village Pantry.
Right.
Okay. Who is this Marshall Bittner?
He's the Kempton town marshal.
Okay.
Or he was. He's not alive anymore.
Who is Penny at the city police department?
She's she's a dispatcher.
Okay.
Was a dispatcher. She's retired.
So Liz told him she advised that she had seen Tabitha on Wednesday evening at Tabitha's house, which we received information that she was at Tabitha's house.
Right, we have a statement. We have a statement from a guy.
Yep, and visited with her until approximately 6:15.
Which is about the time that the witness says that he saw her there.
Right. But had then left, and they did not have any plans to meet later that night or any other night. Okay, so Elizabeth is saying she visited until approximately 6:15. However, all right, so when we go back to the report that we just read from Taco, what time was she seen on the camera from the banks?
5:38.
5:38. But
Right.
yet she's telling him that she was at Tabitha's house.
That's between 6 and and she left between 6 and 6:15.
Yeah.
And the witness who lives across the street identified, or well, said that a person resembling Liz was there at about 6:20.
So how can she be on camera in Kokomo at 5:38 and at Tabitha's until 6:15?
Right. Now, she could have been there at 6:20 if they had left the ATM and went back to Tipton. But as far as being there until 6 o'clock, nah.
Right.
Not being shown on camera at 5:38.
That's what doesn't make sense to me. No wonder why none of her statements and the so-called evidence isn't making sense.
Yeah, her alibis are all over the place.
Yeah. And we know that when it comes to Kyle Neff, he actually saw other people's statements before he gave his own deposition.
Right.
So he knew what other people had said before he even did his deposition.
Right.
All right. So now we're going to move on to the tape statement of Officer Nystrom. And this was done, this says 8/4/03. And Bob Alden, who is Elizabeth's attorney, is there, and prosecuting attorney Jay Rich.
Yep. Okay.
All right, so you're going to be Bob Alden, and I'm going to be Officer Nystrom.
Okay, wait a minute. Who is? Okay, so apparently Nystrom's is JN.
JN, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready?
Yep.
When you went to the park, who was present?
There was a large number of police officers. Sergeant Gary Stout was there. Chief Gordon Taco. Officer Steiner was there. The coroner, Brad Nichols, was present. Sergeant Tim Miller from the Indiana State Police, and a number of other officers. I don't have a complete list and don't recall everybody who was specifically there.
Okay, Sergeant Rick Brown and Trooper Bob Good of the Indiana State Police Department made a sketch and took measurements of the crime scene. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
We are going to go off the record for a second. Okay, we are back on the record. Officer Nystrom indicated that Sergeant Rick Brown and Trooper Bob Good made a sketch and took measurements of the crime scene, and I have been advised that I will obtain a copy of that from Jay Rich. All right, now, you went to the funeral home and you also went to the autopsy. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And during the course of the autopsy, was it determined through this discussion from the doctor doing the autopsy and also Dr. Pless that the only wound that Tabitha Raines suffered was the gunshot wound to the head, or were there in fact recent knife wounds on the body?
I don't recall entirely what the doctor's conclusions were. In fact, I don't believe he made all his conclusions at the conclusion of the autopsy.
Okay, do you remember any discussions during the course of the autopsy about finding any signs of knife wounds or penetration wounds other than the bullet anywhere on the body?
I don't recall the discussion specifically, sir.
Who took the photographs at the autopsy?
The photographs were taken by Officer Steiner.
How, when an evidence technician takes photographs, do they just take whatever they think is important or what the doctor tells them to take photographs of?
The technician will take standard photographs of the procedure, but also the doctor can direct the technician to specific issues or specific points of interest in the autopsy.
Do you recall there being any signs of contusions where there might have been a beating of the person on the face of Tabitha Raines?
I don't recall specifically, sir. Oh my goodness.
In one of the police reports I have, it indicates that a pack of Newport cigarettes were found in Tabitha's house and nobody smoked Newport cigarettes. Do you know anything about that?
No, sir, I don't.
Were you ever called in to take any photographs of that or to get or pick up cigarette butts? Inaudible. Ashtray.
Pick up cigarette butts from an ashtray? Where, sir?
In her house.
No, sir.
You don't know anything about that then?
No, sir, I don't have any knowledge of that.
I don't think I have any more questions. J. Rich. Sergeant Nystrom, your field technician report, which is the first page of that report dated 10/15/02, indicates that you took 2 rolls of 35 millimeter photographs, including aerial photographs. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do, sir.
Have you turned over all those photographs either to the prosecutor's office or Officer Steiner?
I turned those over to specifically Sergeant Gary Stout.
Okay, then he would have taken possession of those and placed them in evidence as far as you know.
I don't know what his procedure is after he receives photographs.
Okay.
Normally, the photographs are not an item of evidence from the state police's point of view. We don't handle them as an item of evidence. They aren't entered into the evidentiary system. They are kept in a photographic system.
Okay, your field technician report, again dated 10/15/02, also indicates that you took photographs at the funeral home.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall taking those photographs?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall what you did with those photographs?
Those also have been turned over to Sergeant Stout.
Are there any pictures that you were involved in taking and that you haven't turned over to Detective Stout?
I don't believe so, sir.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Alden. The pictures you did take at the funeral home, are they only of Tabitha Raines for identification purposes?
Yes, sir.
You weren't asked to take pictures of individuals who may have attended her funeral?
I did not attend her funeral.
Okay, you just went to the funeral home at another time and took her photographs?
She was taken from the scene in the park to the funeral home, and that is where I photographed her, and digital and Polaroids were made for the purpose of showing to the family for identification purposes.
Okay, statement concluded.
Well, that was a whole bunch of nothing.
Right. Oh boy, okay.
Really?
I know.
Really give any he didn't give any information at all. So
Other than he's the one that took the pictures.
Right. Okay.
That was pointless.
That's crazy. And why do they always go off the record for a second and then come back on? I think they should have to state in here why they're going off the record.
Right.
So he was there during the autopsy, but he doesn't recall any of the doctor's conclusions? And he doesn't remember any discussions?
Apparently not.
And he can't tell you what the body looked like, but he was taking photographs of it. That does not make any sense.
So I'm trying to figure out how much of this how I want to say this. He was asked if there was any contusions to the face.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Now, knowing what we've seen,
and what was
we weren't at the autopsy. We weren't at the autopsy, and we could tell you by visually seeing, we could answer that question.
Yes. And the answer would have been yes.
Right.
So what, he was just taking pictures? He wasn't looking at what he was taking pictures of?
Exactly.
That would have been one of my questions to him. So you took the pictures, but you weren't looking at what you were taking pictures of?
Right.
So you can't tell us if there was any contusions on her face?
Right.
I would have pinned him down on that more.
I mean, she had a big old black eye.
Right.
And
there was bruises
and the marks on her neck and everything.
Right.
Blows my mind.
And you mean to tell me when you're taking the pictures you can't see that?
Or that you're not looking? Where you just point your camera away, you're just pointing your camera over and taking a picture and hoping you get a picture of what you're supposed to be taking a picture of?
Oh my God. It's obvious that he did not want to answer those questions, and my question is why? Why not? Yeah, and why did they let him get away with that? Why didn't they pin him down more? Okay.
Well, Alden's not going to pin him down more because he was the defense attorney.
As a defense attorney, he should have pinned him down more.
Well, but here's the thing. You got all these people saying, oh, well, Liz did this and Liz did that and Liz did this. Well, he's saying, oh, well, did you see any contusions on her face? No, I didn't pay any attention. Okay. Jay Rich is the one that should have said, questioning further is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Just another example of incompetency in my suggestion, in my thoughts.
Not to change the subject, but is your chat working?
No.
Mine isn't either. The last thing I see is Mark saying Bentner was the Kempton Town Marshal.
All right, hang on a second. That's all I have on the Facebook page, or on the actual YouTube page, too.
Yeah, that's what I'm on.
So that looks like it was the last comment.
Okay. People don't want to talk today.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to move on from that fiasco. and we're gonna do Tim Miller. Now, who's Tim Miller?
He's the Indiana State Police officer.
Indiana State Police officer. Okay.
He was one in on some of the questions.
I'm just looking for State of Indiana plaintiff versus Elizabeth J. Balser. Does it give us a date?
Yeah. July 29th.
Okay. So once again, you're going to be Mr. Alden and Mr. Rich, and I am going to be
Tim Miller.
Tim Miller. So you're going to be Q, and I'm going to be A for Q and answer.
I reckon.
All right. Also present.
What?
Hang on one second. So the oral examination of Tim Miller was taken in a criminal action now pending in the Hamilton Superior Court, number 1 of Hamilton County, state of Indiana, wherein state of Indiana is the plaintiff and Elizabeth J. Balser is the defendant.
So this was actually taken before her trial.
Yep. So appearances: J.D. Rich, Robert Alden, Linda Spivey. Who's Linda Spivey?
Liz's mom.
Okay.
So why is she there?
Well, that's what I was wondering when I saw that. Why is she there for this deposition?
Well, it's at the prosecutor's office.
Right? But nobody else should be there if Tim Miller is giving this statement.
Right. It should have just been the 2 attorneys.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Alden, we're here on July 29th at the office of the Tipton County Prosecutor J. Rich, and present is witness J. Miller. The deponent, Tim Miller. Mr. Rich, or excuse me, Tim Miller, and myself, Mr. Robert Alden, and Linda Spivey. We're here for the purpose of taking the statement of Tim Miller. I'd ask J. Rich to swear the witness in. Tim Miller, after the first being duly sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, was examined and testified as follows. Questions by Mr. Alden. State your name, please, for the record.
Timothy G. Miller.
And what is your occupation?
I am an investigative squad leader for criminal investigations in the Indiana State Police.
Okay, how long have you been with the state police?
Since 1985.
What should you be called? Sergeant?
Sergeant is my rank.
So you're referred to as Sergeant Miller?
Yes, sir.
Now, your specific function on October, starting with October the 1st up to the present date, is it the same?
Yes, sir.
And what is that?
Investigative squad leader for...
What do you do as an investigative squad leader?
I supervise the detectives assigned to the Peru post.
On October the 5th, there was a body found of Tabitha Raines, and it's my understanding that the state police were contacted by the Tipton County Sheriff requesting assistance of the Indiana State Police. Is that correct?
I believe it was the Tipton City Police Department had contacted us.
Okay.
Requesting assistance.
And were you contacted at that time?
Somewhere shortly after the initial contact, I was contacted by the post.
And there was an assignment made of Detective Frawley to assist in this investigation with Detective Stout. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Who made that assignment?
I would have.
And are you familiar with Detective Frawley?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with his training and experience?
Somewhat.
Is that part of your responsibility to know a person's training and experience when you assign them to assist another agency?
He's not a specialist, if that's what you're asking. There's not a specialty that he does. He's an investigator. He is sound in investigative techniques.
Does the Indiana State Police Department have specific homicide detectives?
No.
You just have a general title of investigators.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar, or were you at that time familiar with how many murder cases had been investigated by Detective Frawley?
To my knowledge, none.
Was there anybody else
I
at the
know.
state?
So you're meaning to tell me that Detective Frawley is going to be one of the main investigators with Gary Stout, and he's never done murder cases?
Apparently not.
Oh, good God. Okay.
Slam dunk on that one, huh?
Yeah.
Was there anybody else at the state police post that had experience in investigating homicides to your knowledge?
On October 5th of 2002,
Uh-huh.
myself and First Sergeant Bob Williams. And I'm not real sure if Detective Teller has or not.
Now, let's talk about specifically your personal involvement as far as assisting in the investigation of this homicide. I've asked you to review the supplemental reports. Is it Detective Frawley? Is that what you call him, or Inspector Frawley, or what do you?
Detective Frawley.
I'd ask you to review the supplemental reports that Detective Frawley has made in his file. Have you done that?
I haven't. He has a large 3-ring binder here full of statements and such. So I have not reviewed all those. No, sir. I did review the transcript of Alicia Little,
which was maybe 3 pages. Okay. This is the only transcript that I'm aware of that has your name on it, where you did this by yourself. So for the record, if you just state and maybe start from the beginning based upon your own recollection, when were you first called on the case, and what, if anything, have you done as far as an investigator is concerned to assist the Tipton Police Department?
I would have been contacted on October 5th, 2002, and I'm not sure what time, but it would have been in the early afternoon hours. I traveled to the scene, which was the park at Tipton City Park, and met with Detective Frawley along with Detective Stout from the Tipton City Police Department. And I believe the chief, Gordon Taco, was there at that time. I believe the prosecutor was there at that time.
Jay Rich?
Yes, sir. And I know those were the ones that I had main contact with at the scene.
Describe the scene when you arrived there. Was it roped off at that point, secured?
They had a barricade tape securing an area off of where the body was located.
Do you know who was responsible for that?
The first officer at the scene should do it. Who actually did it, I couldn't tell you.
And then what happened after you arrived?
They briefed me basically that there was a body that appeared to be a female in the creek. They advised me that at that point they believed the body had been placed into the creek where it was come to rest when it was located. They told me some young boys had found the body. I'm not positive, but I believe the date that it was located was on a Saturday.
Yes, uh-huh.
And I believe the young boys had seen this body in the creek the night before and had said something to one of their dads, and they thought it was a mannequin, so they just kind of disregarded it at the time. Then the next day, they were back down there, and one of them said something to his grandmother. She went out and looked and said, "No, that's a body." So then they contacted the authorities. And I believe they contacted Tipton City Police Department at that point.
Uh-huh.
My job when I go to a scene is to determine if the state police are going to be the lead investigative agency or if another agency is going to do that, and then see what they need from us as far as assistance.
How did you evaluate this situation?
I talked to Chief Taco and Gary Stout, Detective Stout and Frawley, along with the prosecutor, and just kind of determine who is going to do it. I don't know who made the decision. I won't normally make that decision, but if it's in the city has jurisdiction unless they, for whatever reason, don't want to lead the investigation. Then we will. But the decision was made that the city would lead the investigation and we would assist. So then my function is to give them whatever resources that they request that we can help them with, as far as helicopter, MAG team, crime scene technician, additional detectives for interviews, whatever they ask us for that we can help them with.
So at that point in time, someone made the decision that the Tipton Police Department would be the lead agency in the investigation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that you would assist, right?
Yes, sir.
So what, if anything, did you do to assist?
I don't recall if they had already contacted the crime scene technician or if on my way traveling to Tipton, I contacted the post and asked if his name is Sergeant John Nystrom, and he's the crime scene technician from the Peru post, if he was en route or if they had requested him, and I believe they told me he was en route.
And did he get there when you were there?
He was there when I was there. I don't recall if he got there a little before I did or a little after, but I think it was probably pretty close.
Anything else that you did while you were on the scene at the park besides having Sergeant Nystrom come?
At that scene, at that time?
Before that time or at that time, anything else that you did?
I don't recall. At some point, I did ask for a helicopter. They were wanting the helicopter. I had left. I believe that was actually the next day the helicopter was asked for, and they went over areas.
Let's talk about the crime scene just for a second, okay? In conversation with the other investigator there, what did you all personally, did you and the other people attempt to make any personal observations of how that body may have gotten into the creek, i.e. drag marks, footprints, things like that? Did you personally, I know the crime scene investigators are sort of in charge of that, but did you personally look for that type of evidence?
Where I was in a grassy area, that footprints wouldn't have been visible, wouldn't have been left. I stayed down toward where the body was located. I did observe the body from the top. I never went down the bank or anything, just from the top. That day, I never went down to where they had told me that they believed the body could have been placed in the creek from an area toward the hospital. This was behind a baseball diamond.
Where the body was found?
Right, where the body was found. And that at that point, they believed the body could have been placed.
Who told you that?
That would have been Detective Frawley. I'm sure that had part of that conversation, and probably Detective Stout.
Do you know why they believe the body might have been placed in a different location than where it was found?
I know they had said there was some, I believe it was sandals, some thong shoes, or there was some footwear that was found either just into the creek or just on the bank, somewhere near where they was at that point.
Just a loose shoe? You mean loose footwear?
Right.
Do you know if the body had any footwear on it when it was found?
I don't recall seeing any footwear on the body.
Did you see the footwear that was next to the creek? Was it a sandal?
I didn't see it at the time. I didn't go down to that area. I try not to go anywhere that I don't have to go.
Anything else?
I know to that point, not that I recall at this point. Okay.
That makes sense.
I know I went to the Tipton City Police Department then and interviewed 2 young men. One was, I believe, a Casey Walls. Again, I haven't read any notes on it for quite some time. The 2 that had seen the body in the creek. I talked to those 2.
Okay.
Basically, they told me what I told you earlier in the tape statement.
Right.
At that point, I believe I stayed at the city police department to help coordinate. They were getting a lot of phone calls in, people wanting to give information and help coordinate as far as who was going to talk to who.
Well, there was a whole lot of coordinating going on, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you did that day that you remember?
Not at this point.
And then after that day, did you have any other personal involvement in the investigation?
I came back for a few days, 4 or 5 days, probably each day to see what they would need or wouldn't. I know I helped arrange for some transportation of some evidence that had been recovered and transported to the Tipton City Police Department and helped try to determine which lab was going to examine them, those articles.
Who sends out the lab requests and who gets back the lab reports?
Usually the crime scene tech or the investigating officer.
So in this case, it was either the crime scene tech or the lead investigating officer, Stout himself.
I can't tell you how Tipton City Police Department does it. In our agency, it's either the crime scene tech. You're asking who would request the examination. Is that what you're asking?
Who requested and who got back the information in this case? Do you know? If you don't know,
I don't know.
you were just asked to transport the evidence that whoever made a decision that it be transported.
No, not to be transported. I just made arrangements to see. This is kind of an in-between area, whether it goes to our Indianapolis lab or if it goes to our Fort Wayne lab.
How do you make that decision?
Well, by area. And this would go to Indianapolis. And I know that I called and talked to a couple people at the lab in Indianapolis to try to get it expedited. Certain parts of the evidence to get it expedited instead of waiting the normal several months to get things back.
Okay.
Any transportation would have either been done by Sergeant Nystrom or, and I can't think of the crime scene tech for Tipton City.
J. Rich. Steiner.
One of those 2.
All right. Anything else?
As far as from there to the lab, I would talk to people from time to time. If they had several interviews, people coming in, and once I would talk to them, then I'd kind of brief either Detective Stout or Frawley as to what information they had given. And then if there was anything at that time, I would get their name, address, phone number, someplace they could contact them back to get further details later. I talked to people in that manner.
Okay. Anything else?
I know there was a time that I arranged for a helicopter to fly over to see what could be observed from the air. And there was a time that I arranged for a dive team to come and go through the creek. I would have been down there when the dive team came. I would have been down there as they went through the creek and examined it.
You were there when they would have done that?
I was there during that day, yes. I would not have been inside the creek. The dive team would have been, but...
You were there watching them?
Yes.
Do you know if they found anything?
They found some golf balls.
Anything else?
I don't recall them finding anything that was pertinent to the case at that time. And again, I wouldn't have handled that.
Well, either Nystrom or Steiner was present also, right?
Yes.
And other than the things you stated, is there anything else you can think of that you did besides sit through interviews?
Not at this time. Not something that either Detective Frawley or Detective Stout wouldn't have done.
We talked just briefly before the tape went on. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I gave you a transcript of Alicia Little, which has got your name only on it. And you told me when he had the pre-interview that you would have sat through other interviews in conjunction with Frawley or Stout, just like you stated, but that you do remember interviewing this Alicia Little. Is that right?
Yes.
And I guess, is this the only interview you remember conducting by yourself?
I may have conducted other interviews by myself, but I would brief either Detective Frawley or Detective Stout as to what information that person would have given. And if there's anything at that point they needed to follow up on, then they would have contacted them at a later time and gotten more details and would have taken a tape statement.
Do you have any independent recollection of any interviews that you conducted with anybody that you would have given information to either Stout or Frawley where the content of the conversation had something to do with who may have committed this crime?
Well, I would have been alone if I had an interview. Not at this time, no.
Do you remember talking to anybody that had any significant evidence as to who committed this crime?
Alone or with another detective?
With another detective, if not alone.
I would have. I know that there was a time where I sat in with Mr. Yates, Jonathan Yates, that was interviewed by, I believe, Gary Stout.
And what happened in that interview?
That was a few days later, and basically Detective Stout had already interviewed or talked to him at a previous time, if not more than one time prior to me sitting in there. There was a night where we went to Kokomo, and they had located Mr. Yates' truck in Kokomo, and we went there and talked to him, and I assisted in completing a search warrant for his pickup truck. And then we went back. Then I believe I sat in at that time. I don't know if it was that time or time later, because I know that Detective Stout had talked to Yates prior to me sitting in there with them.
All right. But my question is,
No, he never.
did anybody say anything in any interview that you either sat in with or you conducted by yourself that was directly related to who committed this offense?
At that time, no. Further information could have been developed later that something they would have said at that time was more important. You know what I'm saying? More important or more relevant?
But you don't remember any facts yourself in that interview.
I know there were some arrests made later, and I wasn't involved with it at all at that point. Okay, time out. This guy isn't even answering his questions. And you mean to tell me he sat in on interviews or conducted an interview and doesn't even freaking remember what was said? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what it kind of sounds like to me.
Why are these people being so difficult? And then people wonder why they think there's a cover up in this case.
Right.
This is why. You got your own police not giving information and not answering questions the right way.
Well, and if you're a true investigator, you remember things.
Right.
Or at least take notes.
Oh,
it's almost like they can't. It's almost like they can't remember it unless it's right in front of them.
Right.
I mean, and this was in July, so what? That's only 9 months after her murder.
And you know that the attorneys have these notes and these interviews. Why aren't they specifically grilling them on what was in there?
Yeah, because all the attorneys are asking is there anything else that you did?
Right. This is total BS. Oh. Okay. I'm done ranting.
Okay. All right. So then just summarize the testimony of Alicia Little to the best of your knowledge.
Basically, she had either went to the Tipton City Police Department or contacted by phone saying that she had some information. As far as she had heard a pop, some sort of pop. She was outside her home, and I believe it was on 2nd Street in the 2020 block, I believe.
Where is that in relation to the park?
I'm not real familiar with Tipton, but I believe it would be north a block or two. I remember standing in the street. Gary Stout was with me at the time. She had left a message. We went to her home and talked to her, stood in the street. She said, I heard it to the south here. She didn't know if it was inside a house. It could have been inside a house that would have caused it to sound like a muffled or a pop instead of a bang. She wasn't sure where it came from. She knew that there was some activity as far as a pickup truck, a male and a female, that pulled up in a pickup truck, and there were some people out on the porch of the house just next to her, or two down. And she believed that she could be where that pop would have come from. Or she said it would have been, or she said it would have had to have been a further distance away. She believed it was outside because she heard an echo to it. When we were standing in the road or the street looking down to the south from her residence, she said it could have been like in the cornfield, which is about a block away. I believe, if I recall, close, or it could have been further than that yet. And I believe that cornfield is located just to the north. I believe there's a cemetery to the south of the cornfield and then the park. I think the creek runs through there and the park is to the south of it yet.
Could she identify this sound as a gunshot or not?
No, she said it was a pop.
Based upon your interview with her, do you believe that she heard any gunshots?
I'm not certain what she heard. From talking to neighbors after that, the pickup truck, the male and female that she had observed outside at that time was either one house down or two. I don't recall at this point. I believe they were moving some articles out of the house. Some furniture, a refrigerator or something, was moving out. I don't believe they had anything to do with the investigation at that point.
You think the sound may have been from the movement of furniture?
It could have been. We found nothing to make us believe it was a gunshot.
Now, you were talking about talking to other neighbors. Do you know you've been to the park, you've seen the creek where the body was found, right?
Yes.
And there is a golf course that's adjacent to the creek. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then there's a baseball field that's adjacent to the creek. Is that right?
On the opposite side of the golf course.
And there are residences that are adjacent to the creek on the west side.
Further down, but not in the area that I was at.
Not where the body was found.
No, there's...
How about on the west side?
On the west side, there was a golf course. On the east side is the park, if I have my directions right down there.
Well, are you familiar with any attempt to canvass any residences that was next to, that's adjacent to the park, just to ask people if they heard any gunshots that night?
I know the hospital. To answer your question, no. I know the hospital would be what I would say would be south from the Ball Diamond. I know they talked to some employees that was at the hospital out back.
Was there anything?
Then there's a nursing home after that.
Is there anything else that you did? There's that question again.
No. Yeah. No, not that I recall at this point. I'm sure there's other things, but not that would be relevant at this point that I recall right now.
Obviously,
oh, go ahead.
Obviously, the reason why I'm taking your statement here is to find out, because I don't have any reports.
Sure.
I'm just trying to ask you if there's anything that you know of that I wouldn't have a report about that you feel has anything to do with the investigation in this case, in solving this case.
No. The answer is no.
All right. I don't have anything further. Off record.
All right, and then the page after that is I, Robin McNew, a notary public in and for the state of Indiana, do hereby certify that the foregoing oral examination was recorded by mechanical device in the above captioned cause, and that the foregoing typewritten transcript is a full, true, correct, and complete transcript of the testimony requested. I do further certify that I am a disinterested person in this cause of action, that I am not a relative or attorney of any party or otherwise interested in the event of this action, and am not in the employ of the attorneys for the respective parties. In witness whereof I have set my hand and have fixed my notary seal this 27th day of January 2004.
Check the comments.
Hunting Evil, you're not even in here for the right case. We're talking about Tabitha Shuck Raines, not Delphi.
Or Flora.
Yeah, or Flora. This is the Tabitha Shuck Raines case out of Tipton, Indiana.
And we don't want involved in the drama.
Exactly. Okay. So those are the 4 statements for today.
The next 2 will be the big ones.
Yes. Mike Tarr and Tony Frawley.
And just so everyone knows, Mike Tarr's is 43 pages and Tony Frawley's is 61.
Huntington Evil, if you think you have something related to this case, please email me at beyondtheevidence1@gmail.com.
We don't care about Meow.
Yeah, but she's up to her old tricks
I know.
again.
But that has nothing to do with this.
Yep, I
She
agree.
doesn't, at least.
So here, Huntington Evil. Banners. Where's my banner? Here we go. There's my email address now. Email me the information there, and then we'll talk. Yeah, that would be great if you can break things down, because I'm not quite understanding how it pertains to this case. But yes, we'll talk, definitely. All right. So for today, that is going to be all the depositions and statements that we read, because Mike Tarr and Tony Frawley's is so long.
Yes.
It's going to take us another
hour and a half, maybe
2 hours to get through them both.
Well, let's see here. How many did we go through today? 24, 40. We only went through 45 pages today.
Yeah. But I think the
45
biggest
pages and 45 pages in an hour and 45 minutes. So
I think the biggest thing today is the fact of
nobody knowing anything.
I don't get the questioning of these officers at all.
Right.
I don't get it. If you're doing a deposition for a trial, you mean to tell me that you're just going to let them say, oh, I don't know, or I just coordinated? And I mean, come on. Are they trying to tell me that the only two people that have any information whatsoever is Gary Stout and Frawley?
Right. And one of them is no longer among the living.
Right. And we don't have any deposition or statements from him.
No. We have his notes. That's it.
We do have his notes. Yes. Some of them.
Some of them, yeah.
So, yeah. It's just, I'm hoping that as we get into Tarr's and Tony Frawley's, we get some more answers. And then as we go into the supplemental documents, we'll actually I know we'll get information off of those. And then once we're done with the supplemental documents, then we're going to go into the individual
statements,
depositions and statements.
I know a lot of the Tipton area people will know this, but not a lot of people outside of the Tipton area know this. Tony Frawley worked for the state police during this, but then he retired from the state police and actually became Tipton County Sheriff. And was sheriff for, I know one term, maybe two, I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But now he's retired totally. Last year was his last year.
Okay. I was just looking at a message here, seeing if it was pertaining to this, but it's not.
Okay.
So we got through 4 statements. That's big. The next 2 big ones are going to hopefully give us more information. And do you want to go ahead and do those next 2 statements on Monday?
Next Monday?
Mm-hmm. Are you free then?
Should be able to.
Okay.
Like I do anything.
Yeah, and that'll be at night because I'm off today, but next Monday I have to work, so it'll go back to the nighttime. Yeah, later in the evening. I just got to check my schedule, and then I'll make a thumbnail for it right away so everybody knows. And then, like we said, if you have any information on this case, email me at beyondtheevidence1@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts, suggestions, or hear any contradictions as you're going through these videos, you can either email them to me or put them in the comments below the video, and we will look over all of those.
Or go to the Justice for Tabitha Facebook page.
Yes.
And there's also a chat link to that page.
Yep. So, thank you for joining us today and listening to these 4 statement depositions from these officers. We will be back with Tabitha's case on next Monday evening, and we'll go over the 2 big statements from Mike Tarr and Tony Frawley. So, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.